Detective humiliates the wrong man in court, only to find out that man is a judge, and his past is about to destroy him. Detective Ryan Hale stormed in, smirking like he owned the place. His badge gleamed under the golden courtroom lights as whispers rippled through the audience. At the front, Judge Marcus Bell sat quietly, his dark suit perfectly pressed, his calm eyes fixed on the detective now strutting before him. Ryan didn't wait for permission. "You? The judge?" He scoffed, his voice slicing through the silence. "What's next? Janitors running the city council?" A few gasps came from the back rows. The courtroom clerk froze mid-note. Judge Bell didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses, eyes unwavering. "Detective Hale," he said evenly, "you're out of order." Ryan laughed loudly, turning to the audience like he was performing on stage. "Out of order? You've got some nerve lecturing me, Judge. I've been cleaning up this city while people like you sit behind a desk pretending to deliver justice." The words stung the air like a slap. Officer Daniels, standing between them, shifted uneasily but said nothing. Cameras from the press captured every smirk, every glare. But Marcus didn't respond with anger. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. His tone was measured, dangerous. "Detective, I'd advise you to watch your words carefully. The next thing you say might determine how you leave this courtroom, walking or in handcuffs." A hush fell. Even Ryan's grin faltered for a second. Then he laughed again, louder, meaner. "You don't scare me, Judge." Marcus Bell's gaze hardened. "Then let's see," he murmured. "Bailiff, lock the doors. No one leaves until the truth is heard." The room went silent, cameras clicked, and that was the moment everyone realized this wasn't just another trial. This was war. The courtroom was locked. The sound of the heavy bolt sliding into place echoed like thunder through the chamber. Every eye turned toward Judge Marcus Bell, whose calm composure was now replaced by quiet intensity. Detective Ryan Hale's grin twitched. "What's this? You think you can intimidate me?" he barked, puffing his chest out. "I've got years on the force. I've put away men twice your size and 10 times more dangerous." Marcus rose slowly from his chair, his black robe swaying slightly. "Then you won't mind if we take a closer look at your work, Detective Hale." He motioned to Attorney Claire Monroe, who stepped forward holding a thick brown folder. Ryan frowned. "What's that?" Claire placed it on the evidence table. "Internal Affairs File 4-9-3. It contains complaints filed against Detective Hale over the last 3 years. The murmurs began. Phones came out. Reporters whispered. Ryan slammed a hand on the table. "You can't use that. Those are sealed records." Judge Bell tilted his head. "Actually, they're not sealed anymore. A federal court unsealed them this morning. Under my order." Ryan's confidence faltered. You can't do that." Marcus leaned forward, his voice cutting like steel. "I can." "And I did." Claire opened the file, revealing photos, statements, and timestamps. 3 excessive force complaints, 2 instances of tampering with evidence, and 1 arrest that resulted in the wrongful conviction of an innocent man who spent 7 months behind bars. The audience gasped. Officer Daniels shifted, eyes narrowing at Ryan. Marcus stepped closer. "Detective Hale, the man you mocked today is the same judge who overturned that conviction, the same man whose decision exposed your lies." Ryan's smirk vanished. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The courtroom was silent again, and this time it wasn't Marcus Bell who looked small, it was him. Detective Ryan Hale's face turned pale under the bright courtroom lights. The once confident smirk that had commanded rooms and intimidated suspects was gone. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Even the courtroom cameras seemed to lean in closer. Judge Marcus Bell didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His calm authority filled every inch of the space. "Detective Hale," he said slowly, "do you still wish to speak about who deserves to be in this courtroom?" Ryan's jaw clenched. "You're twisting things," he spat, his tone defensive now. "Those cases were misunderstandings. You know how this city works. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to get justice." Marcus's eyes darkened. "Justice?" he repeated. "You planted evidence, intimidated witnesses, and mocked the very law you swore to uphold. That's not justice, Detective. That's corruption wearing a badge." The crowd murmured louder. One woman in the back wiped away a tear. A man with a notepad whispered to the journalist beside him, This is bigger than anyone thought. Officer Daniels took a step forward, his hand resting near his holster, not in threat, but readiness. He could sense where this was heading. Ryan's voice cracked. "You think you can take me down? I've got friends in high places." Marcus took a slow breath. "Then call them, because right now your friends won't be able to help you." He turned toward Claire Monroe. "Play the footage." The projector flickered to life, casting light across the wooden panels. Grainy security footage appeared. Detective Hale, in uniform, slipping a small bag into the trunk of a suspect's car. The crowd gasped in unison. Ryan's body stiffened. "That's not what it looks like," he shouted. Marcus folded his hands. "It looks exactly like what it is." The walls felt closer now. The predator had become the prey. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Gasps, murmurs, and flashes from journalists' cameras filled the air. The once cocky detective Ryan Hale now stood exposed, the shaky footage of his own betrayal looping across the courtroom screen like a haunting confession. Judge Marcus Bell raised his gavel and struck it once. Bang! The sound cut through the uproar like a blade. "Order in the court," he commanded, his voice steady but sharp. The noise subsided instantly, yet the tension only deepened. Ryan's eyes darted around the room, desperate for an ally, but every familiar face, prosecutors, officers, even his own squad, avoided his gaze. Officer Daniels, who had once respected Hale, now stood still, jaw tight, his expression unreadable. "Detective Hale," Marcus began, leaning forward, "this footage, combined with your past misconduct, paints a very clear picture. You have not served justice, you've hijacked it." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're better than me, Judge Bell? You think just because you sit behind that bench you know the streets? You don't!" Marcus's tone stayed calm, almost too calm. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't know the streets the way you do. But I know the law. And I know what it looks like when a man believes he's above it." A chill spread through the room. Even Claire Monroe, the prosecutor, looked shaken. Marcus turned toward the audience. "This courtroom," he said, "isn't a stage for pride or prejudice. It's where truth stands taller than ego." He looked back at Ryan. "Detective Hale, your arrogance led you here. But it's your actions that will decide how you leave." Ryan's breath quickened. His voice was smaller now. You can't do this." Marcus met his eyes, unblinking. "Watch me." The audience sat frozen. The fall of a hero had begun. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the courtroom felt electric, alive. Then, with a quiet nod from Judge Marcus Bell, Attorney Claire Monroe walked to the front and spoke firmly, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, the prosecution would like to call one more witness." Detective Ryan Hale blinked. "Witness? There's no witness in this hearing," he snapped. "You're making a mockery of due process." Marcus adjusted his glasses. "Detective Hale, you've done quite enough mocking for one day. Proceed, Miss Monroe." The side door opened. A woman stepped in, hesitant but determined. She wore a simple blouse and carried a folder pressed tightly to her chest. The crowd murmured. Ryan froze. His bravado cracked. No, she's not supposed to be here." Claire's voice was calm. "This is Sergeant Olivia Ward, your former partner." The air thickened. Every camera turned toward her. Olivia looked straight at the detective who had once been her mentor. "Ryan," she said softly, "I didn't want it to come to this." "Don't," he hissed under his breath. "You know what happens if you talk." But she stood taller. "What happens if I don't?" Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were transcripts, recordings, signed statements, and photographs. She turned to the judge. "These are copies of internal memos and voice recordings where Detective Hale instructed me to plant evidence and falsify reports. I've kept them because I knew this day would come." Ryan's face turned crimson. "You're lying. You're doing this to save yourself." Marcus held up a hand. "Enough." He looked at Olivia with steady eyes. "Sergeant Ward, for your courage and integrity, this court thanks you." Then he looked back at Ryan. "Detective Hale, your past just walked through that door, and for the first time Ryan Hale's confidence completely shattered." Detective Ryan Hale's breathing grew shallow as the walls seemed to close in. The once commanding officer, who'd strutted into the courtroom full of arrogance, now looked cornered, hunted by his own past. The sound of papers rustling echoed like thunder as Sergeant Olivia Ward placed the documents on the evidence table. Judge Marcus Bell nodded to Attorney Claire Monroe. "Proceed with your questions." Claire stepped forward, voice steady and sharp. "Sergeant Ward, do these documents show Detective Hale ordering illegal searches and false evidence reports?" Olivia swallowed hard but nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Every word was recorded. He told me sometimes the truth needs a little help." The crowd gasped. Marcus's brow furrowed. "Detective Hale, would you like to respond to these accusations?" Ryan shot up from his seat, fists clenched. "You don't understand how it works out there. We're the ones cleaning up your messes while you sit safe in your robes and ties. You think the system's perfect. It's not. It's broken, and I did what I had to do." Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "So you admit to falsifying evidence and violating your oath?" Ryan froze. His eyes darted around the room, searching for escape, for a lifeline. But every face he saw, from the audience to his fellow officers, had already turned against him. The camera zoomed in as his voice cracked. I did what was necessary," he whispered. Marcus leaned forward. "No, Detective. You did what was convenient." The silence was absolute. Even the ticking of the courtroom clock sounded loud. Ryan collapsed back into his chair, the weight of years pressing down on him. Marcus looked to the bailiff. "Officer Daniels, take note. That sounded very much like a confession." Daniels nodded grimly. "Yes, Your Honor, the mighty had fallen, and everyone had just witnessed it live." The silence that followed was suffocating. Everyone in the courtroom knew what had just happened. Detective Ryan Hale had confessed in front of witnesses, the press, and the very judge he had mocked. The camera flashes intensified, each burst freezing his downfall in light. Judge Marcus Bell leaned back in his chair, the weight of authority surrounding him like a mantle. "Detective Hale," he began, his tone calm but resonant, "the badge you wear is meant to protect the innocent, not persecute them. You've disgraced that oath, this department, and this court." Ryan's head hung low. His hands trembled, still clutching the table as if it could keep him from sinking. "You can't do this," he whispered. "You don't have the authority." Marcus's gavel struck the desk once, firm and final. Bang! "Detective Ryan Hale," he said clearly, "under Article 8 of the State Penal Code, I hereby order your immediate arrest for evidence tampering, perjury, obstruction of justice, and abuse of authority." The crowd erupted in gasps. Reporters bolted to send their breaking news alerts. Officer Daniels hesitated, torn between loyalty to a fellow officer and his duty to the court. Marcus's eyes met his. "Officer Daniels," he said quietly but firmly, "do your duty." Daniels nodded, stepping forward. The sound of metal cuffs clinking echoed through the chamber. Ryan jerked back, his face twisting in disbelief. "You're making a mistake, Daniels. I trained you." Daniels' expression hardened. "Yeah," he said quietly, "and that's why this hurts." He clasped the cuffs around Hale's wrists. The detective's arrogance crumbled into silence. Judge Bell stood, his voice steady. "Let this serve as a reminder, no one, not even those with badges, stand above the law." The room fell silent again, but this time it was out of respect. The sound of the handcuffs closing around Detective Ryan Hale's wrists seemed to echo forever. The same hands that once slammed doors, waved warrants, and commanded respect were now bound, symbols of his own undoing. Judge Marcus Bell watched silently as Officer Daniels led Hale away from the defense table. Reporters whispered fiercely, their cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. The once feared detective looked smaller now, stripped of power, pride, and the illusion of control. "Your Honor," Claire Monroe said softly, "the prosecution recommends immediate detainment without bail." Marcus nodded. "Motion granted. The accused will be held pending further investigation." Ryan's voice cracked as he turned back toward the bench. "You think this makes you a hero, Judge? You think locking me up fixes the system?" Marcus's tone was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had seen injustice before. "No, Detective," he replied, "but it stops one more man from spreading it." Ryan struggled against Daniel's grip. "You don't get it. The system's always been against people like me. I just learned to beat it first." Marcus paused. "And yet here you are, beaten by your own arrogance." The audience fell silent again. Some looked at Hale with pity, others with quiet satisfaction. As Daniels escorted him toward the door, Olivia Ward lowered her gaze. Despite everything, her voice was gentle. "Ryan, it didn't have to end like this." He didn't respond. The courtroom doors swung open, flooding the room with light as he disappeared through them, the same doors he had once stormed through full of swagger. Judge Bell looked down at his bench, weary but resolute. Justice had been served, but the cost of it weighed heavy. And yet, deep inside, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The courtroom had emptied, leaving behind the faint echo of footsteps and whispers of what had just unfolded. Judge Marcus Bell remained seated, staring at the files scattered before him. The wood-panelled walls that had witnessed justice now felt heavy, almost alive with memory. Claire Monroe approached quietly. "You did the right thing today," she said softly. "The department needed to see this. The city did." Marcus sighed, loosening his tie. "Right isn't always easy, Claire, especially when the truth cuts close to home." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, his gaze falling on an old black-and-white photograph tucked beneath a folder. 2 young police recruits, standing shoulder to shoulder, smiling. One was Ryan Hale, the other was Marcus Bell. Claire's eyes widened. You knew him?" Marcus nodded slowly. "We were partners. 20 years ago, before I became a prosecutor." The room went still. "I saw his potential," Marcus continued, voice heavy with regret. "He was brave, sharp, but he was reckless. I thought the badge would discipline him, teach him humility. Instead, it gave him power he wasn't ready for." Claire exhaled. "So all this time—" "I knew what he'd become," Marcus interrupted quietly, "but I didn't want to believe it. I kept telling myself people change. Today, I finally stopped lying to myself." For the first time that day, the strong, unshakable judge looked human, burdened, tired, yet resolute. Claire placed a hand on his arm. "You didn't just judge him, Marcus. You freed yourself from that guilt." Marcus looked at her, his eyes heavy but clear. "Maybe," he said softly, "but now I have to face what comes next." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, as if the city itself was responding to the truth that had just been uncovered. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the courthouse, but the peace was deceptive. Inside his chambers, Judge Marcus Bell sat reading the morning headlines splashed across every newspaper. Detective Hale arrested in courtroom meltdown. Judge Bell humiliates veteran cop on live camera. The truth had gone viral. Videos of the confrontation had flooded social media overnight. Millions of views, endless debates. But not everyone was celebrating. A knock came at the door. Claire Monroe entered, her face tight with worry. "Marcus, we've got a problem." He looked up from his desk. "Let me guess, the department isn't happy." She nodded. "Not just the department. The union has called an emergency meeting. They're accusing you of bias and misconduct for humiliating one of their own on record." Marcus leaned back, unshaken but weary. "Of course they are. When corruption's exposed, the first defense is to attack the messenger." Claire placed a folder on his desk. "They're demanding an internal review. They want your credentials suspended until the inquiry's done." The judge was silent for a long moment, his fingers tapping the edge of his desk. "They want to make an example out of me." Claire sighed. "They're scared, Marcus. What you did didn't just expose Hale, it cracked open an entire system of lies they've been protecting for years." Marcus stood slowly, looking out the window at the courthouse steps where protesters had begun to gather, some cheering his name, others holding signs demanding his resignation. He turned back to Claire. "If they're coming for me," he said quietly, "then I'll make sure the truth goes with me." She looked at him, alarmed. "What are you planning?" Marcus's eyes hardened. "To expose everything." By afternoon, the courthouse was a fortress of flashing cameras and protest signs. Some held posters reading "Justice for Truth," while others shouted, "Fire Judge Bell." The city was split. Half saw him as a hero, the other half as a threat. Inside, Judge Marcus Bell walked steadily toward the hearing chamber. His robe trailed behind him like a shadow, the weight of integrity pressing on every step. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a system built to protect itself. At the long table sat the police union board, 5 stern-faced officials with Chief Howard Briggs, a man with political ambitions and a sharp tongue, at the center. Cameras lined the back wall, broadcasting the hearing live. Briggs leaned forward. Judge Bell, he began, voice dripping with disdain. You publicly humiliated a decorated detective and violated judicial protocol. What do you have to say for yourself? Marcus met his gaze. I enforced the law. The fact that he wore a badge doesn't place him above it. Briggs smirked. So you say. But Hale claims you targeted him because of personal history. The room stirred. Claire Monroe, sitting beside Marcus, whispered, They're baiting you. Marcus didn't flinch. Detective Hale and I shared history, yes, he said firmly. We both swore an oath. The difference is, I kept mine. Gasps rippled through the audience. Briggs slammed a hand on the table. You think you can expose one officer and rewrite how we run this department? Marcus leaned in, his tone low and razor-sharp. No, Chief, I'm not rewriting it. I'm revealing it. Then he slid a flash drive across the table. Inside are 37 sealed reports, corruption, falsified arrests and payouts, signed by your officers. Briggs froze. Cameras zoomed in. The world was watching. And for the first time the hunters looked afraid. The room fell utterly silent as Judge Marcus Bell's flash drive slid to a stop in front of Chief Howard Briggs. The once confident board members exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew. This wasn't just about one corrupt detective anymore. It was about the entire system. Chief Briggs swallowed hard. What is this supposed to prove? Marcus's voice was calm but carried the weight of truth. It proves that justice doesn't bend for uniforms or titles. These are your officers, Chief. Officers who swore to protect but chose profit over principle. He turned to the audience, to the cameras that were streaming the moment live across the nation. This is what happens when silence protects corruption. Today, that silence ends. Briggs tried to regain control. You can't leak internal reports without authorization. That's a felony. Marcus raised a hand. Then charge me, because I'd rather stand trial for truth than live quiet in a lie. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Reporters scrambled to broadcast every word. Claire Monroe stood beside him, steady and proud. Briggs's voice wavered. You're finished, Judge Bell. Marcus smiled faintly. If my career ends here, so be it. But your department's secrets won't stay buried. The people deserve the truth. Right on cue, screens around the courtroom flickered to life, Marcus's evidence streaming to every major news outlet. File after file exposed names, dates, and crimes hidden for years. The crowd exploded. Some cheered, some cried, but everyone felt it, justice breaking through. Briggs slumped back, defeated. What have you done? Marcus looked toward the cameras one last time. I've reminded this city that justice has no color, no rank, and no fear. Outside, the courthouse bells rang, not just for a verdict, but for a reckoning. And for the first time in decades, truth finally stood taller than power.